Let's be consistent.
Welcome to the Key to Consistency. I am your host, Rakia Collins, and on today's episode, we are going to look at consistency from a macro level and really begin to understand how our individual efforts of being consistent as individuals play a role in some macro level items, right? Some things like environmental conservation, social justice, philanthropy, and charitable giving. Those are just some of the themes that we're going to dive into today. And we're going to break those down because all of those macro level items come from individuals. They come from individuals being consistent, right? And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive into our first topic, which is going to be environmental conservation, and how, as individuals, we play a role in conserving our environment. Before we kind of dive into, the what we can do and the why we should do it, I think it's important to really pause and focus more so on the why first versus the what we should do, right? When we think about our environment, we think about the earth, right? We think about the place that we call home, irrespective of our race or our gender or our geographical location. The one thing that we all have in common is that we live on the same planet, right? And since we all live on planet Earth, there are things that we as humans have in common, like the ability and the need to breathe, right? How does that process work? We all know how that process works, right? Carbon dioxide is released from us. We get oxygen from the trees. It becomes a very cyclical process. But what most people don't think through as they think about their environment is the role that you can play in conserving the environment and the positive impact that we can have as humans on the world, right? When we think about organizations, when we think about communities, when we think about society, nations, all of those terms that I just threw out, the bedrock of them all are individuals, right? Individuals doing their part to make up a positive community, to make up a positive organization, positive nation, society, etc. And so if we as individuals begin to build in sustainable practices on a consistent basis in our lives, it'll feed out into those other levels of society and ultimately have a positive impact all around, right? And so some of the things that I think we can do to be and have more sustainable practices is to reduce waste, right? As simple as that may sound, is pretty profound. And I know if you specifically live in America, maybe several years ago, there was this big rush of people who stopped using plastic bags as much at the grocery store. And you would see people coming into stores with their own reusable bags. Depending on where you shopped for groceries, you might not have seen that theme, but it was something that at that time, at least speaking from my experience, I was like, why are these people bringing in their own bags when the store clearly, right, has their own bags? Well, outside just reducing waste for, you and for the environment, when we think about it, what purpose do those plastic bags serve outside of getting your groceries? Now, I can speak from the African American community and say that we will use those plastic bags in our home as trash bags for the bathroom, or if you needed to get a to-go plate, you would put your to-go plate in the plastic bag. Like, they have other uses and other purposes outside of groceries, which you could argue that we are extending the life of that plastic bag. But the point is, it is still a plastic bag. It is still going to end up in a landfill and unfortunately oftentimes in the ocean, right? Polluting our waters. And so I would encourage you, if you can, continue to try to think through and look into getting some reusable bags, right? I'll tell you one, they are a lot stronger than having to double up or even triple up on plastic bags when you're in the store. So really just making sure that you look into that that if you can, because it's really a great way to make sure that you are reducing your footprint as it comes down to plastic. Another thing that we can do, of course, is try our best to conserve energy. I know it has been hot. This summer has been a very, very hot summer, and we want to, have the AC blasting. And I'm not telling you to sit in a hot house, because I am not going to sit in a hot house. But what you can do to help conserve energy, of course, is making sure that take a look at your windows. Make sure that your air that you're paying for is not just seeping through your windows. And, now you're just spending your money because your bill is so high because the air is constantly on, because your home is never getting to that set temperature. Monitor who's coming in and out of your home. Like my parents used to tell me growing up, don't run in and out of my house. You need to stay put. You need to stay where you are. If you're going to be inside, be inside. If you're going to be outside, be outside, right? And so when we think about conserving energy, just really I would preface this by saying, look at your home, look at your windows, even maybe look at your front door. Make sure your front door, back door, any type of entrance to your home is really safe and secure and really sealed properly is the word I'm looking for. Because if it's not sealed properly, then you unfortunately could be wasting a lot of resources. I would also, encourage you to shop at places, going back to the first action item of reducing waste. Shop at places that encourage the use of reusable bags. And I found this so funny. I have to tell you guys this quick story because it literally just came to my mind. So my mother is married to my stepfather, and my stepfather is from Germany. And so when they first got together, things are great now, right? It's been great. But he shops at a store called Aldi. And I'd never heard of an Aldi before. I never knew what an Aldi was. And so we went into Aldi together. This was back when I believe I was in high school, or I might have been coming back from college. Either way, it was several years ago. And if you've been to an Aldi, then Aldi is a very interesting experience because first and foremost, to even get a cart, because they don't have people who wrangle in the carts. They don't have the little cart stops that are out next to your cars. So to even get a cart from an Aldi, you have to insert a quarter into the grocery cart. And that is how you get a buggy. Then you go inside Aldi, you do your shopping. They have really good prices. They are a really good grocery store to shop at. And then once you're done, right, you go up and then you'll notice, which I noticed probably because, again, I live in America, I noticed that their cashiers were able to sit down and they were sitting on chairs. And I was like, you don't see that at other places like Walmart or Publix or anywhere you see that. They stand up. But I said, okay, cool. That's interesting, right? The last thing I noticed that I said, wow, this is crazy. Probably why their prices are so low. They do not give you grocery bags. You have to get your own grocery bags. You have to use those reusable bags. And that's why I guess the thought came to my mind, because we're talking about reusable bags. And I'm like, Aldi is one of those places where either you're going to bring your own bags or you're going to carry your individual items out yourself one at a time. And that can become very cumbersome. I think Aldi it was built by someone who I will say understands human nature. Because let me tell you, with that quarter, just because they don't have the little grocery or the little buggy cart things around your car, most people, I will speak for myself, I'm getting my quarter back. You can only get your quarter back when you put your cart back where the other carts are, which generally is right in front of the Aldi store. And so shout out to Aldi. If you've never shopped there, you should go and you should shop there. And just, report back on social media, follow us on social media at The Key to Consistency. I want to hear about your Aldi experience. What was it like for you? Personally, I like shopping at Aldi. I think Aldi is a great place to shop at. They will help you encourage the reduction of waste. That is for sure. So off of the topic of reduction of waste, and we go back to kind of conserving energy. outside of what I mentioned earlier with your AC, make a practice and a habit of turning off lights when you leave a room. As simple as that sounds, you will be surprised. My stepfather, just I guess going back to him again, it was not even just turning off the lights. It was unplugging electronics when they are not in use, right? Like when you're not using something, you need to unplug it out of the wall. And of course, not like your TV or anything like that, but like if we were in the kitchen and like the coffee maker is plugged up and you're not using it, or the blender is plugged up and you're not using it, it's like, why is that plugged up? And so interesting things like that, I think outside, like when I was, of course, living there in my home with my parents, it was very, very different because my mom got remarried when I was 15. So, I was already pretty established in my ways and things. And so it was very different to live with someone who looked at the world that way. But I can tell you as an adult, I certainly appreciated the efforts to conserve energy, especially when we think about our theme of environmental conservation. These individual things that we can do in our homes, reducing plastic, conserving light energy, conserving energy from electronics, like those may be small things, but we all know that it is small things that really lead to those big results, right? And the last thing that I would encourage you to do along the lines of local conservation and really saving your environment, if you will, is joining your local conservation initiatives, participating if you have like any community cleanup activities where there may be planting trees or picking up litter or something to that extent. Even if you personally don't want to go, if you wanted to just say, hey, I'm going to just slide you $10 or $15 to get this done, right? To help pay for equipment, whatever you can do, I would encourage you to do, because as mentioned earlier, we all have to call this place home, and we should all do what we can to make sure that we keep our environment clean and well kept. Today's episode is brought to you by the merch shop at thekeytoconsistency.com. I would encourage you to visit our merch shop to see if there's anything that piques your interest. One of the easiest ways to be consistent is to be visually reminded that you are on a mission. You are going to be consistent. So whether you pick up a phone case or you pick up a t-shirt, we have something for you. Again, that is www.thekeytoconsistency.com. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. So the next thing that we are going to dive into as it relates to these macro themes of consistency is going to be social justice movements. Now, I know this can be a touchy subject for people, but it is a part of our world. It is a part of our reality, and it is worth discussing. Consistently bringing up the fact that things may not be even, things may not be fair, is an important part of making sure that we can create the world that we believe aligns with biblical standards and expectations, right? If you don't raise your hand to address things, it won't change. If you are into sports, then you have probably seen a lot in the recent headlines about equal pay between women and men when it comes to different sports, things like the WNBA, sports like soccer. You probably have been exposed to that, and it's important to make sure that when we think about justice and we think about advocating for equality, that someone has to raise their hand, even if it makes someone else uncomfortable, especially if we are advocating for something that we know is purely unfair, right? One of my favorite Bible verses that I love, that I tried my best to commit to memory, and I'll summarize it for you guys, is Micah 6:8, and it says, "Hear, O mortal, the Lord has told you what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." And so when I think about that verse, in the context of social justice movements, I personally try to always advocate for the little person, right? Advocate for the person who may not necessarily be able to effectively advocate for themselves. And even if you think about this in the context of your life, right? If you are someone who works a job and you are in a position to advocate for someone who wants to work at that same company that you have, or you have the opportunity to write a letter of recommendation, all of these small things are truly you advocating for someone else, right? And that's really where it all starts. It is the bedrock of raising your hand and advocating for things that others may not necessarily get if you didn't raise your hand. If we don't support those marginalized groups to increase awareness about a particular issue and hopefully bring about a policy reform and result in a more inclusive society, right? So I would encourage you, if you don't know of any social justice issues and you're like, what are you talking about? I would encourage you first and foremost to educate yourself, right? You can do this by a lot of different ways, by, reading books or articles, or just talking to people that are not like you, that didn't live where you live, didn't grow where you grew up, maybe a different ethnic background, right? To kind of shed some light on some social justice issues and some of the histories that come from marginalized communities, right? If you live in America, or have heard of like the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Like being able to just truly educate yourself on different movements, where those movements come from, why they're here, and what role, if any, can you play in being able to help those marginalized groups, right? I would encourage you to, in your own dialogues with people that if you hear something that doesn't sit right with you, that doesn't seem just to you, that it doesn't really align with your principles and with your values, to raise your hand and speak up on that, right? Never be afraid to challenge someone's thought processes by asking a question, right? Because if you don't ask the question, you will never know if someone is saying something that doesn't sit right with you or you believe is incorrect. Never be afraid to voice your opinion, right? That's really where it all starts. Lastly, I would encourage you to, when you think about your voice and you think about what you can do on that macro level, vote. I know that it's not an election season at this point, so hopefully this doesn't come across as an ad, but I would encourage you to vote. Research your elected officials, and not just about the president. Like, I know, especially again in an American context, that is something that most people tend to rally for, but even things like Congress, like your local, like congressman, when you get to vote for them, or like your local sheriff, like most people don't pay attention to those smaller elections that occur in their state or even in their county, right? Like making sure that your voice is heard on every level is very important, because when you have a say in the policies that are being created, you can make sure that they are promoting fairness and equality the way that they should be, right? So those are just a couple of things that you can do as it relates to social justice. Again, all of these macro topics start with us as individuals doing something and moving in a very consistent manner. And the last one that I wanted to discuss with you guys today is going to be philanthropy and charitable giving. Outside of, again, if you haven't caught on, I do believe in Jesus Christ. I do believe in God and the Holy Spirit. And outside of just giving to charity and like giving your tithe, you should ideally, right, participate in charitable giving or in philanthropy. Sometimes you have a lot more time than you have money, and sometimes it's the opposite. You have more money than you have time, right? We want to be humans that give, and that give abundantly. And why? Because when you give consistently, it has a transformative impact on your heart, right? But also on the world. because now we're giving to, whether you decide I'm going to give to organizations that help in homelessness, or I'm going to give to charities that help in hunger, I'm going to give to a charity that promotes clean water, like whatever you decide to give, time, money, resources. If, some organizations, they will give you like a list of like, hey, we need this in terms of equipment. We may need masks or we may need gloves, right? If it is a cause that you personally can relate to or that you care about, these organizations that genuinely are trying to help and make the world a better place truly need people that care enough to raise their hand and say, you know what, I'm going to come alongside you and help you improve the education system, help you improve healthcare. I want poverty to stop, right? Like those types of issues. I'm sure if you do a quick Google search, you can find tons and tons of organizations, of charitable organizations that support a cause that you are particularly interested in. I'd say, start by choosing an organization that aligns with your values, right? And if you want to consistently donate your income or consistently donate your time to help support their mission, because when your world becomes bigger than just you, it truly changes the way you move throughout your day-to-day life. Outside of giving of your time and your resources, encourage your friends to do that as well, right? Rather than sitting and chatting on the phone with them on the weekend, you can say, hey, let's go chat while we go plant trees, right? We can go outside and we can go plant trees together. And I truly mean actual trees, not the drug. Go out and actually plant trees in your local community, right? Like go out and try to find a volunteer opportunity. If you're going to be with your boyfriend or your spouse or your family, as a family, we can go make it a family outing, right? And we can go do this together. We can go impact our local community together. And you'll be surprised the impact that these things can have on the world, because it's not just you, it's you bringing along other people with you to consistently practice these sustainable behaviors, right? We're going to practice those behaviors in advocating for social justice. We're going to practice them in trying to reduce our waste and trying to reduce our footprint. We're going to focus on engaging in philanthropic efforts, really to make sure that as individuals, we are contributing to a future that we would want to raise our children in. Even the smallest of actions contribute and can create a ripple effect of positive change. Hopefully from today's podcast, you gleaned something or you learned something that made you think, man, I can do this. I can reduce my efforts. I can go to the store and start using recyclable bags, right? I don't have to get the plastic bags, right? I can do something, no matter how small it is, to positively impact my community. And of course, no episode will be complete without a verse from the greatest book in the world. This one comes from Galatians 6:9. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. Do not get weary in doing good, guys, and trying to strive to make a difference in this world that we live in, because we only have one. There's only one earth that we know of, right? And we want to make sure that we do right by the world itself and by those who live in it. Guys, remember that consistency breeds mastery, and mastery transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of The Key to Consistency. Wherever you are listening to this podcast, it would mean everything to me if you could rate it, review it, reach out to me on Instagram. Would love your feedback, would love to hear anything you like, anything you don't like. Please feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit from it. And until next time, bye guys.